After finishing Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater, I was reminded of my favourite aspect of not just the Metal Gear games, but a lot of games in general, which is the iconography of the boss fights, rich with spectacle, mechanical depth, and in some cases, emotional nuance. But are they all made equal in Delta? Let's give them a tier list and find out. As with all of my tier list videos, the aim is to create fun discussion and find our like-minded bros and sisters and create our tribe. Your experience with these bosses might be different from mine, and that's fantastic. Let's bond over our shared love of the game and compare notes, but keep it cute and keep it classy in the comments. Also, I'm sure this is obvious, but if I don't say it, people will read me in the comments for it. Spoiler warning for anyone still playing through MGS3 or Delta, you should know what kind of video you signed up for when you clicked on this. But hey, let's dive on in. So let's start with Major Ocelot in the Canyon. Now I think this boss fight is fine and it's a great tutorial for things to come, but given that it is the first fight, it's not exactly challenging. When I look at a boss fight, I don't just look at the challenge. A boss isn't good just because it's hard after all. There's a lot of other factors to consider. Spectacle, connection to the plot, mechanics, and more, but Ocelot doesn't really carry a lot of weight within this fight on any of those fronts, at least not compared to the other bosses in this game. However, one does have to consider the rest of the franchise as well, and Ocelot's importance within it. So seeing him use the revolver for the first time, and with similar mechanics to how he works in the first Metal Gear Solid game, is pretty great. Being able to keep track of how many bullets he still has left in the chamber before he has to stop, gives the player something to keep an eye on throughout the fight. The fight also does a good job of making you use what you've learnt up until this point too, like using the hornet's nests hanging above Ocelot's head, or the humorous and eclectic ways that you can interact with him, like shooting his hat off to distract him. So I definitely don't think that Ocelot is a bad boss fight, but compared to the rest, I'm gonna put this in alligator tier, so lowish, because the others are just so much better. By the way, I'm gonna go in order of when the bosses are encountered in the game, and they're gonna be tiered in relation to each other. So when I say that a boss is bottom or low tier, I don't necessarily think it's trash. Metal Gear Solid has amazing boss fights throughout. It's just possibly weaker than the others within the same game. But you're welcome to give this a go yourself and post your own tier list in the comments through the link I'm going to leave in the description box below. Next up is the Pain, first of the Cobra units. Now I love the Pain's design, bringing the supernatural into the fray, which is something that Metal Gear Solid has always been really good at doing, and it's camp as heck. The man literally controls bees and somehow still manages to have a presence on the screen that's imposing. That being said, the Pain isn't especially difficult, nor should he be considering how early you encounter him in the game, to be fair. He just basically requires relentless gunfire to get through his armor of bees. I love that there's silly interactions to be had here, like the bees can carry your grenades back to you if you throw them. He can literally make a Tommy gun out of bees and shoot bullet bees at you that you then have to remove, and then having to jump in and out of the water to avoid the bees does keep you on your toes. In terms of the story, while there is story behind the Pain, some of which is actually pretty gross, the poor guy's been infected with parasites against his will, which is horrible to think about, and well, if you look at the poor sod, he's clearly not having a good time. But let's be real, there's nowhere near as much to the Pain as a character as there is some of the many other characters in Snake Eater. Nowhere even close, so he gets minus points for that. But I will say, that's true of most of the Cobra units. They all suffer from this problem, certainly the first few, so I don't want to hold it against the Pain specifically too much. Overall though, I do think that the Pain was slightly more fun to fight than Ocelot was, so I don't want to put him in the same tier. So I'm going to go ahead and put him in Cobra tier. This one I'm curious about where you guys would place him against Ocelot, because I actually think a lot of people would put Ocelot above the Pain due to his relevance in the story. But I don't know, what do you think? Next up is the Fear. Now, like the Pain, there's not a lot of plot to the Fear, but I feel like that's the only real minus point there is to him, because I really like this encounter. It's not super difficult, unless you're sitting on Extreme or European Extreme mode, but in those, everything is really difficult, but the unique ways you can interact with this fight are really well done. Actually, I think there's an argument to say you could place the Fear in two different tiers depending on how you fight him. Going the lethal route, the Fear's actually kind of annoying, certainly more so than he is hard, so that works to his detriment. But if you're going non-lethal, that's where you can get clever. Tricking the Fear into eating poisoned or spoiled food after he runs out of stamina, using the fake death pill to get him to approach you, having him fall prey to any traps you didn't trigger in the area yourself, it's actually a really unique and even playing field that I think really takes advantage of the systems in the game, so I think the Battle of Wits present really elevates the fight. I don't think that the Fear is the best fight in the game. I think it's the best fight up until that point in Metal Gear Solid 3, but there are better ones than him. But I am still happy to put the Fear in Foxhound tier, so I'm putting him pretty high. And that's just because of the way that that fight interacts with the different mechanics. There's a variety of different ways to tackle him, and you'll notice in this particular tier list, that's a trend that keeps things pretty high. The end is infamous for how memorable this boss fight is, and there's a damn good reason for it. The end doesn't have a ton of backstory within the game, much like the previous two Cobra units, but unlike them, he does have a reason to love him and his ethos on the battlefield. Any Metal Gear Solid 3 player will know that the legacy of being able to allow the end to pass away from old age through the in-game clock, or even take him out in an earlier cutscene, is extremely memorable. But that actually lends more to the end's character than you might think. He's old, like really old, on death's door, but he still wants to fight you anyway because he has nothing to lose. He wants one last send-off before nature takes its course, and he wants you to give him the fight of his life, quite literally. So there's a respect that Snake and the player goes into the fight with that's rare and precious. But none of this even highlights the fight itself, because what makes it so good is how much you can tailor it to how you play the game. If you want a classic sniper shootout, go for it. But the end doesn't rest easy. He's good at what he does. You want to go running after him and get up close to take him out? You can do that too with all the tools at your disposal, like the thermal goggles. Hell, you want to steal his parrot and disgruntle him so that you can locate him that way. Yep, all possible. Some people might consider this fight long-winded and arduous, but that's the point. He's a sniper. Waiting is his game, and you're playing it. There's also a reason to beat him non-lethally as well. Certainly if you plan on keeping on doing that for the rest of the game, is you get a new toy for doing so, the Mosin Nagant rifle that can take people out non-lethally. I think the end is a hallmark of the uniqueness that Metal Gear Solid has to offer with this fight. This is big boss territory. It's not overhyped in any way, shape or form. It's truly brilliant. Spectacle-wise, I think the Fury nails the vibe. Flames everywhere, screaming and shouting all the while, and if he catches you, there's very little you can do to escape. But I've never been able to shake the feeling that after the end, the Fury feels like a bit of a letdown. Now maybe that's not fair to the Fury, because it's not a weakness on his fight's part, but further evidence of quite how good the fight with the end was, but it's definitely a feeling that's hard to shake. There's a lot of interaction with this fight, but it all feels a bit obvious in ways that the other fights like the Fear didn't. Except for one, actually. I really like the challenge of trying to sneak up on the Fury and cut his suit with the knife, as it makes it so that he takes way more damage. It's a really neat touch that feels super flavorful to the encounter, but stuff like bursting water pipes to put out the fires and forcing the stealth approach because the Fury's so powerful that it's essentially mandatory feels a bit more railroaded than some of the other fights. I certainly don't dislike the fight with the Fury, and I think it's better than the first couple of bosses in Snake Eater, but it definitely doesn't hit the heights of the one before or some of the ones after, so I think Cobra tier fits the Fury quite nicely. The encounter with the Sorrow is really difficult to rate against his fellow boss fights, because let's be honest, the Sorrow's not really a boss fight at all, but he does carry a lot more story focus than any of the other Cobra units before him, so that's something to remark on at least. The encounter with the Sorrow was definitely unique and interesting from a technical standpoint. Snake is dead during the whole thing, essentially, and having the souls of the people you've dispatched that actually line up with the number of deaths you have tallied up is really cool. But there's very little variation in the way the fight plays out. You're spending more time avoiding things than actually fighting them, and ultimately, the encounter is resolved with a gimmick, courtesy of the revival pill. So, I'm gonna put the Sorrow in cow tier, but please don't get me wrong, I think the Sorrow is an amazing character. If anything, he's one of my favourites of the Cobra units, due to how he interacts with Snake, the boss, and Volgin, certainly after the encounter you have with him, and how he carries a lot more depth than most of the characters in the game. But this is a list talking about the encounters themselves and the boss fights, so while I understand that Sorrow isn't a fighter as a character per se, somebody has to go at the bottom here, and I think it kinda has to be this. Sorry, Sorrow. Volgin is a great fight, I'm just going to say that now. There's a lot of build up for Volgin, showcasing his powers in different cutscenes and the ruthlessness behind him, and I don't think his boss fight disappoints. You have very little room to move, so there's no escape from him, and the fight is different from all the others in that it's all about positioning. Other characters like Ocelot and the Sorrow are included in it. It all feels climactic in a great way, even though it's not even close to the actual finale. You never want to be stood in front of Volgin. But you kinda have to be so that he attacks you in ways that leave him vulnerable to your counterattack. You're under a timer, so there's urgency involved, you have a heck of a lot of reason to want to take Volgin out, there's lots of silly ways to interact with the fight too. It ticks all the boxes for a great Metal Gear Solid fight. I particularly enjoy wearing the Rykov mask to make Volgin hesitate and throwing rations out because the metal casing is electrically conductive and redirects his lightning attacks. There's just a ton of, well, Metal Gear Solid to this fight, which is why it's so great. But do I think that the fight with Volgin is as strong as the one with the end? No, not really. But not by a lot. I think Volgin's definitely one of the better fights in the game, close to one of the best, but it's not the absolute best because the best ones stand so high that I can't, in good conscience, put Volgin right at the top alongside them. So I'm gonna put him in Foxhound tier, but I'm curious what other people would say about this one. The second fight with Volgin, or more specifically, the fight alongside the Shagohod, I'll be honest, I actually think this one's weaker than the first fight against Volgin. The spectacle's definitely there, and Delta absolutely hits home with the scale of the prototype Metal Gear, with all the visual updates and everything, but it's just such a simple fight. Drive by, shoot the legs, shoot the back, repeat. You can't run out of ammo, because Eva provides a consistent source of it throughout both phases of the fight, and while the second phase against Volgin certainly paints him as more threatening than he was the first time, he's really not any tougher because it's just more of the same. Shoot the legs, shoot Volgin, repeat. This fight lacks the variety and the fun, for want of a better word, that most of the other boss fights in Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater have, and half of it's on rails, so I wouldn't feel right putting it high. It is, however, at least an actual boss fight, unlike the Sorrow, and it does carry a lot of weight in the story, unlike the early Cobra units. So I'm not going to put the Shagohod in bottom tier. I'm pretty confident it can go in Crocodile tier though. And then finally, the boss. From a cinematic standpoint, this is one of the single greatest boss fights literally ever made in a video game. Having to fight against a character you love, knowing the absolute horror she's had to endure to get to the point where she's standing in front of Snake, asking him to kill her, carries more weight than the vast majority of boss fights across gaming history. The spectacle of the fight is beautiful, the field of white lilies is breathtaking, like the ending scene of a really big blockbuster movie, and it encapsulates the meeting of equals that the fight represents, and mechanically, it ticks all those boxes too. Normally, I would criticize the lack of variety in the ways in which you can fight the boss, but it's as I said, this is a fight made to be a meeting of equals. You're meant to fight fire with fire. You need to use all of the tools at your disposal to be able to even try and land a solid shot on her. And speaking of a shot, that final shot, the one I'm talking about, it's one of the most poignant moments in video game history. So to put this fight any lower than Big Boss tier would be straight up criminal. It has to go there. The boss earns her name. So there you have it. There lies my tier list of the boss fights in Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater. Given how close the remake is to the original Metal Gear Solid 3, I'm pretty sure I'd be more than happy to keep this tier list consistent for the original version of the game as well, but now I'd like to hear from you. How would you place the bosses in this game? Let me know in the comments and post your own tier list using the link in the description box below to this one. Boss fights are arguably my strongest passion in all of video games, so I'd love to hear from you on games you'd like to see a tier list from that includes them. I'm working on Hollow Knight Silksong right now and absolutely in love with that game, so rest assured I'll be bringing one for that when I've finished it. If you've enjoyed this video and you want to see more gaming discussions, tier lists, reviews, and all sorts of different things, consider subscribing to the channel and like the video because every single one makes all the difference to a creator like me. And if you'd like to join in with videos like this, consider checking out the Patreon link in the description box too and have your comments and tier lists featured in the videos to show everyone your opinions alongside my own. And as I've said at the start, the aim of these videos is finding common ground across all sorts of games and finding our tribe, so to speak. So let's work on that together. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. But for now, take care everyone. Bye bye.